100 years ago tomorrow. And we're broadcasting now the first of 3 programs in which John Steen recalls the art and career of the singer. This first program is called Accounting for Taste.
John McCormack. We're celebrating the centenary of his birth, and that record in particular makes me remember his death, very nearly 40 years ago now. I remember mulling over the opening sentence of Compton Mackenzie's editorial in the Gramophone magazine in November 1945. McCormack had died late in the September, and Mackenzie wrote, "The news of the death of the world's greatest living tenor reached me too late to say anything about John McCormack." I read that with some emotion, some wonderment too. Was he right? The world's greatest living tenor. Had McCormack been that? Greater than all those famous Italians who followed Caruso, than the German Karl Erb, the Austrian Richard Tauber, greater than Smirnov the Russian, and Melchior the Dane? Well, I was impressionable at that time, and I was impressed. And this was so particularly because I'd just discovered, for myself I mean, McCormack's pre-electrical recordings. That is, the ones made before 1925 or 26, when the electrical method of recording came in, and made his voice sound to my ears then, as I recall it, thin and rather hard. The earlier process showed a much sweeter tone, and no doubt the younger age of the singer had something to do with it too. A more extensive range was on display, and in particular I remember that record, Our Moon of My Delight, coming as a revelation. It's one of the songs from Lisa Lehman's settings of Fitzgerald's Omar Khayyam in A Persian Garden, and we'll hear the rest of it now. I don't know how the music itself strikes you, but I fancy we need to be less apologetic about such things nowadays than we did in 1945 when I first heard the record. I'm sure that to those of you who are unused to the sound of the orchestra in these old recordings, it'll sound at first at least very peculiar indeed. But the voice emerges clearly enough, a lyric tenor of exceptional purity, grace and individuality, and the artistry and control are equally remarkable. You may remember, for instance, how that first time through, the high note at the end in That Same Garden was taken softly and followed by a finely gauged downward portamento to the rest of the phrase. Now, the second time, you'll hear it with a good ringing forte, followed by a clean break, and then the rounding off of the song with a marvellously held last note, starting softly, diminishing gradually away to silence. McCormack made the record on March the 16th, 1911.
Among the gay stars scattered on the grass, and in thy triumphant reach the spot, where I
Now, that recording from 1911 seemed to me in 1945, and indeed it does now, to be one of the most lovely and accomplished of recordings by any tenor singer. And with some others of McCormack's from that same period, it did make me feel that the Gramophone magazine's editor, who as he himself owned had been a personal friend of McCormack's, was not making an exaggerated claim. And now, the greatest tenor since Caruso died has gone, he concluded. And I remember echoing to myself the words of that song, "How oft hereafter rising shalt thou look through this same garden after me in vain." Impressionable, as I say. But a sterner critic must have had some rather similar thoughts. Ernest Newman wrote in the Sunday Times about the dead singer. He was a patrician artist, dignified even in apparent undress, with a respect for art that is rarely met with among tenors. Tenors always seem to come in for this sort of sniping. I don't know that they're really much worse than the rest. Anyway, Ernest Newman concluded, sadly and impressively, there is no one to take his place. And yet, I thought, and yet. We heard a lot of McCormack in those days over the radio, Housewife's Choice, These You Have Loved, and most people had some of his records, usually the same ones. And the ones you heard most often were generally not of the best music, and not, I would say, the best of the singer. It was hard not to gain a kind of mental caricature, partly of the Irish in him, all those praties, old turf fires, kerry dances and what-not, but also of the thin E sounds that made Believe Me If All Those Endearing Young Charms sound like an Irish letterbox singing. A much admired record then was Where'er You Walk, and I'm afraid that it still strikes me as something of an object lesson of the wrong sort.
Fan the glade, trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade. Trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade. On the glade, trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade. Trees where you sit shall crowd into
Perhaps you'll think differently, but I dislike several things about that. One is McCormack's way of taking the note ever so slightly but ever so repeatedly from just below. Cool and shall are examples. And they also are examples of his habit here of closing the vowel in too quickly on the consonant, and I don't think that the alliterative L justifies this. The tone, too, tends to get itself pinched up with the thin vowels and lodge in the bridge of the nose. Later on, another tendency combines with these to spoil the even serenity of the song. It's the vice of his great virtue of being free with note values on occasions so as to bring out the natural conversational character of the words. But it isn't right here. So, if we play the middle section, you can hear what I mean. The words, the blushing flower shall rise. If we play on to the end, you can then check what troubled me, and does so still. And no doubt you'll recognize, too, that there are also many individual felicities that may still endear the record to many listeners.
Wherever you tread, the blushing flower shall rise, and all things flourish, and all things flourish, wherever you turn your eyes, wherever eyes, where'er you turn your eyes. Where'er you walk, cool gale shall fan the glade. Trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade. Trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade. Where'er you walk, cool gale shall fan the glade. Trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade. Trees where you sit shall crowd into a shade.
That record of Where'er You Walk was made by McCormack in 1936. Now, he could sing Handel as well as any man living, then or now. This is demonstrated by at least two very fine records, one of which I'll play in a later program, and the other of which we'll hear now. The aria from Atalanta, Care Selve, he sang in English as Come My Beloved, and he made his recording of it in 1924 with piano accompaniment. Again, some of the vowel sounds may seem excessively thin, but here he handles the music with the most sensitive touch, and there are moments of delight, so that I find, however well you come to know this record, it always produces a renewed sense of wonder. some most beautiful individual notes there in that aria from Handel's Atalanta. It was made in 1924. But the individual notes are part of a fine, straightforward performance, not on exhibition as special effects. McCormack had such mastery that he could have turned each recital, each recording, into a sort of self-advertising tour de force. But I think there are times that one wishes he would use his skills to embellish the melodies. But though his scale work was impeccably fluent, though his trill was as true as any tenor's on record, and though his breath control could take him through a sort of running marathon, he used such accomplishments sparingly, and only when the music seemed to him to call for them. I don't think even his severest critics accused him of showing off. What they did accuse him of course, was singing rubbish. Or if they didn't want to go as far as that, they would put it as a matter of regret that he didn't devote a higher proportion of his concert programs to good music. Now, I think that most of us would agree with that, and McCormack was sometimes rueful about it himself, promising more Hugo Wolf and Brahms, while defending his programs with the undeniable truth that more people would be disappointed if they didn't have Killarney than would be pleased if they found, shall we say, a mysterious title such as Beherzigung on the program. But what about this rubbish? I was struck recently, in reviewing the albums which EMI have issued in commemoration of the centenary, by some remarks in the essay which accompanies these records. It's by Desmond Shaw Taylor, who heard McCormack many times, and who says of the Irish songs that they most vividly call up the essence of the tenor's art as a popular minstrel. And he refers in particular to a song called Terence's Farewell to Kathleen. I will not deny, he says, that after scores of playings, I find the emotion contained in this record as disturbing as though the song were by Schubert.
So, my Kathleen, you're going to leave me all alone by myself in this place. But I'm sure that you'll never deceive me. Oh no, if there's truth in that face. Though England's a beautiful country, full of elegant boys, what then? You'd never forget your poor Terence. You'll come back to old Ireland again. Folly to keep you from going, though fate 'tis a mighty hard case. For Kathleen, you know, there's no knowing when next I may see your sweet face. And when you come back to me, Kathleen, none the better shall I be off then. You'll be speaking such beautiful English. Oh, I won't know my Kathleen again. Now where's the need of this hurry? Don't fluster me so in this way. I forgot twixt my grief and the flurry every word I was meaning to say. wait now a minute, I beg you. Can I talk if you bother me so? Oh, Kathleen, my blessing go with you. Every inch of the way that you go.
The song is a fine example, perhaps, of what Ernest Newman had in mind when he referred to McCormack's ability to be dignified even in apparent undress. And yet that won't do either, for dignity is only the beginning. Further into it is something which Desmond Shaw Taylor also points to. Pathetic, he says, is the touch of humour in the line, "You'll be speaking such beautiful English." Heart-rending, the fluster of the last moments, so familiar to anyone who's ever said such a goodbye, when we cannot recall the one thing that's most needful to say. Heart-rending. That doesn't exaggerate. And really it is a tribute to McCormack's ability to live the song he's singing, and to have the intelligence to know that, in this instance, the very essence of it lies in restraint, that the thing with which the heart is full cannot be said till it compels its own utterance, with the words, "But Kathleen, my blessings go with you," sung in that voice that takes the full swell of such emotions, and which McCormack, consciously or not, held in reserve till the very moment of its release. Now, I don't wish to defend all the so-called rubbish that McCormack sang, but I do have the feeling that some of it, or some of what a critic or a musical member of the public must have felt to be poor stuff when he saw it down on the programme, is nevertheless not to be so entirely deplored. Here's one, which I'm sure must have raised a shudder among visitors to a classical concert, but I find it hard to listen to it without an answering emotion. And what song, I wonder, does better in expressing an adult's feelings about a newly named child? The man's hopes, the child's prospects, in a melody that, however undistinguished, is not ill-framed.
Tommy lad, though you're scarce a wee year old, yet you're long and you're strong and your head's a mass of gold, and you've got a mighty will of your own. You've got a kind of a way that will carry you along, I know. Yes, Tommy lad, Tommy lad, Tommy lad. Tommy lad, Tommy lad, you're a funny little chap, but you'll talk and you'll walk, soon you'll scorn your father's lap. You'll want a horse, you'll want a ship, you'll be longing to depart, but you'll have to wait a long while yet before I let you start. Tommy lad, Tommy lad, Tommy lad. Tommy lad, Tommy lad, oh, a man you soon will be, and you fight for the right to be a better man than me. For life's a dreary, weary way, and it's up the hill and down. But I wish you luck, I wish you joy, I wish you many a crown. Tommy lad, Tommy lad, Tommy lad.
McCormack's record from 1913, with its good clear diction, generous voicing and full heart, cannot, to my mind, be banished to some sort of limbo beyond serious music and before pop. Do you ever hear pop with at any rate that degree of nobility underlying the words? Do you ever hear pop sung remotely with such beauty of tone and classically trained production? Also, what serious song, as I say, puts its finger more surely on that particularly deep human emotion, an adult's feelings for a child's future? Well, one does come to mind in McCormack's own repertoire that's comparable perhaps in subject matter. The parents' feeling about losing the children as they grow up and pursue their lives apart from the parents whose love goes with them. That's Rachmaninoff's To the Children. McCormack recorded it twice, once with Chrysler's violin, and then later with piano accompaniment by Edwin Schneider.
At midnight in days long since fled, dear children, I've watched with deep joy at your bed. How often your brows have I signed with the cross and prayed there, God keep you from sorrow and loss. The love of our Father protect you. While calmly you slumbered to keep you in sight, to watch you and know that your soul was snow white, to wish for you gladness and long happy years, untainted by evil, unbroken by fears. How sweet and how dear were those vigils. But now in the nursery reigns the stillness and gloom. Gone, gone the glad voices, no sound in the room. No lamp lights the icon that hangs by the door. My heart aches, the children are children no more. What anguish to lose them forever. Oh, children, at midnight, to old days be true, I'll pray them for one who prays nightly for you, who walked on your brows made the sign of the cross, and ask God to keep you from sorrow and loss. The love of our Father protect you.
To the Children by Rachmaninoff. It is poles apart from Tommy Ladd and from Terence's Farewell in the expressive resources of the music itself, but not in the art of the singer. He's feeling it in the same way as he feels the much simpler songs, and in the same way his heart, which is in the voice, goes instinctively to the emotional heart of the song. Looking at the score, and perhaps hearing another singer in it, you might say that the emotional centre of the song is there in the long notes of the cry, "O children," on the highest note. And in one sense that is the climax, but the curious thing about emotion is that it's not the great cries, "O horror, O the gods, O children," that move us. It's more often the place where emotion is most deeply felt and just controlled. In Terence's Farewell, we're moved when he calls out, "O Kathleen, my blessings go with you," because we know that it comes from a full heart that wants to say so much more. In this song of Rachmaninoff's, it's when the first section is repeated. "O children, at midnight to old days be true, and pray then for one who prays nightly for you, who oft on your brows made the sign of the cross, and asked God to keep you from sorrow and loss. The love of our Father protect you." McCormack, you can tell, feels it deeply, and there are points at which the swelling tone tells us the voice and heart can only just trust themselves. By the last phrases of the verse, all is accepted and under control again.
For you, who oft on your brows made the sign of the cross, and ask God to keep you from sorrow and loss. The love of our Father protect you.
Now, that song to the children, although it's what you'd categorize as art song, is nevertheless sung in the spirit of the simple man, and a parent who might just as well be a peasant as anything else. And in spirit, therefore, it's not such a world away from the Irish songs of farewell, or other quite simple-hearted pieces that for McCormack were very much home ground. Much further from home, in their different ways, were, for instance, the songs of Hugo Wolf and the operas of Donizetti. Yet McCormack explored both, and in both unlikely territories he was marvellously successful. I shall talk about his operatic career in the next programme, but perhaps at this stage, while I'm accounting for taste, I ought to balance the account properly and say that I'm convinced he was not a great operatic artist. His acting improved, but was never, by all accounts, more than satisfactory, and he was never, on his own admission, heart and soul believing in opera. His operatic records are rarely vivid as drama. That famous record of Il mio tesoro from Don Giovanni, for instance, musically meticulous, is dramatically perfunctory. One has to make a distinction, and say that he was not a great opera singer, but a great singer in opera. In the old days, when you turned the side over from that famous Il mio tesoro, there was Una furtiva lagrima from Donizetti's L'Elisir d'Amore. It was made in New York in 1910, and if not perfect in every respect, it is a most beautiful, idiomatic and true piece of singing.
Well, del suo bel carattere I miei sospiri confondere per poco a suoi sospiri I palpiti sentir confondere I miei coi suoi sospiri cielo si può amore di più non chiedo cielo si può amore di più non chiedo si può morire, si può morire, si può morire. Oh, no.
Not only an exceptionally beautiful lyric tenor voice there, but also a real mastery of the style. The smooth, easy flow, the phrase over at the bridge on that held note, che più cercando io vo, and on into the change of key, mama. The diminuendo at the end of the verse, the cadenza so very fluent and finely shaded. Now, it's a far cry from that to the intellectual concentration of Goethe and Wolf, as in that song whose title I mentioned a little while back, Beherzigung, or Contemplation. What should man aspire to, asks the poet. Should he be content with what he has, a house, a tent, or trust in the rocks? Even rocks crumble.
Ach, was soll der Mensch verlangen? Ist es besser ruhig bleiben, Klammern fest sich anzuhängen? Ist es besser, sie zu träumen? Soll sich ein Häuschen bauen? Soll unter Zelten leben? Soll auf die Felsen trauen? Selbst die besten Felsen beben.
Here, in such speculative philosophy and such stern declamatory music, we might have expected McCormack to be well out of his element. Not so, however. And when in the old days we turned the side of the original of that record, made in 1932, it was to find, in another of Wolf's songs, McCormack's imaginative absorption and his vocal mastery at the very highest point of their achievement. Here's the last section of that song, Ganymede, where the ecstasy of striving towards the embrace of the all-loving Father finds such moving expression. Coming back once again to Compton Mackenzie's unhesitating attribution, the greatest tenor since Caruso died. Well, one record of one kind, one of another, the claim may look doubtful. But over the whole wide range of McCormack's work, well, the case mounts up.
Part of Hugo Wolf's Ganymede. John McCormack, accompanied by Edwin Schneider. That program about the singer was presented by John Steen, and the producer was Peter Tanner. The second of these programs marking the centenary of McCormack's birth will be broadcast next Wednesday evening at the same time, 6:30. It's called Over Land and Sea.